I began to worry that there may be a thief in our home. The sight of shoes by the door, both men's and women's, made me frown. Since neither my husband nor I were meant to be home, our house ought to be empty. Nonetheless, I sensed that someone was present in the restroom as well as at the door. Someone was clearly having fun because of the loud, vulgar voice coming from the restroom. While it's common for husbands to invite their mistresses home while their spouses are away, this situation isn't plausible. My spouse was standing right next to me, palely staring toward the lavatory, so this voice couldn't be his. I'm Jessica, and Adam and I have been wed for 3 years. We are not yet parents because we are both employed. Nonetheless, I think we have a contented and affectionate life, going out or traveling on our days off. Fortunately, neither our in-laws nor parents put any pressure on us to get a family. Since they actually reside close by, we are able to keep our positive relationship going and get together for family dinners. Our in-laws suggested that we rent the lovely, slightly older home. Once a month, on average, we have dinner parties. My mom and I always cook the meal, and we spend the evenings eating food supplied by our in-laws and drinking Dad's favorite wine. Mom had visited that day in the morning to assist with setting for the dinner party, but she appeared abnormally quiet and depressed. She voiced her concerns as she was chopping the ingredients, asking herself, "Do we really need this much? We may not have enough time to complete it all." She wasn't like this at all. "What's wrong, Mom? For today we've simply prepared the standard amount," I inquired. She gave me a startled look before laughing it off. "Dear, I apologize. I'm concerned since Dad hasn't been eating as much as he used to." "Are you serious? Does Dad have a bad cold?" I inquired. Since his early years, my dad has been a self-made businessman, a self-proclaimed entrepreneur. He's never wavered in his work ethic. I hardly remember my dad playing with me on his days off when I was a kid. I worry for him, even though I don't remember him being around that much. The idea that he could be working himself sick worries me. Mom was hesitant to talk at first, perhaps so as not to frighten me, but she did talk when she did. "It's not a disease. Although Dad is in excellent health, he has been acting aloof lately. He has been critiquing my dinner and remarking on how simple my outfit is." Why would he say such things? I pondered. That he would say that to Mom, who has always been the center of our family, is terrible. Mom, though, dismissed it with a "I'm fine." Perhaps Dad's recent company startup has caused him a little stress. Even though I remained worried, we allowed the conversation to wane and returned to cooking despite her assurances. We were going to cook Dad a special dinner today, complete with his favorite steak and dessert, to help him with his new business. My spouse, Adam, was preoccupied as usual and couldn't unwind until everything was immaculate. He always makes sure the living room and entry are spotless before we entertain company, even when it's just the family. He is very careful about cleanliness. Dad, my mother-in-law Teresa, and my father-in-law Eric arrived as I was finishing up the garden. "Jessica, can I have a word?" I was checking the pan to fry the steak when Teresa shouted out to me. She entered the kitchen with a serious expression on her face and handed me a box that appeared to be a present without saying anything. Perplexed, I accepted it, and to my surprise, when opening it, was the emblem of a well-known steakhouse. There were thick, excellent steaks inside that smelled so good. As it happened, we had unintentionally made the same dish. I figured that cooking fewer steaks would be a simple enough solution. It was not the first time our gifts had happened to match, after all. "Wow, did you go out of your way to buy this?" I asked with a smile. We could have asked about the steaks, but we heard it was a celebration. It feels a little strange. Shall we simply serve today's gifted steaks? "But you and Adam can still eat them, right?" Teresa retorted. "Since we're older now, eating too much meat may seem a little heavy." I was at a loss for words. Since Mom had assisted with the preparations, it felt improper to prepare so much food that would be wasted because everyone in the family is getting close to 50. You need to have made a statement. How callous, Teresa said as she walked out of the kitchen. She didn't see my reaction as she left with the steaks, but I was astonished by her remarks. That was the first time I had heard someone say something like that. In the past, we never planned our gifts together, and even when we did end up giving each other the same thing, we usually laughed it off. Previously, we had always given each other chocolates or similar things as gifts. I was a little uncomfortable, but I didn't give it much thought because I reasoned that she might have been offended by the pricey gift. Dad was ecstatic about the steak from the upscale restaurant during the dinner gathering. With a quick glance, Mom appeared to comprehend my predicament and obligingly pretended to be just as thrilled about the steaks we had cooked. Teresa, Eric, and Dad departed, and Mom cleverly made beef stew using the remaining ingredients. Before they were cooked, we could have still had the steak, I remarked. You would have grown weary of steak together, Mom said, putting her portion in a food container and saying, "This way, you can take it home." Mom made a great beef stew, and even though I felt a little awful about it, Adam and I devoured it rapidly as the flavors melded together. I later learned that Dad wasn't happy with the stew, calling it out of date, even though it was delicious. Mom's meek little smile made me feel even more angry than I had before. Yet, I was unable to let go of my anger. After that dinner party, I received an unexpected message from Adam a few weeks later. Due to developments on the client's end, the overnight business trip he was scheduled to take had to be canceled. He informed me that he will return home as normal. I had intended to spend some time at my parents' house since he was expected to be away for 5 days. But my intentions changed when he returned home. I informed my mother over the phone before meeting Adam to go home. I noticed something odd when we got home. Did we forget to turn off the lights? Certain that I had turned everything off before we left, I inquired. Since there was a light on close to the entryway, I apologize for wasting the electricity. Adam, however, reassured me, adding, "Don't worry about it," as he put the front door key in. Then all of a sudden, he was silent. I said, "What's wrong?" Adam said, "The front door is unlocked," which caused me to froze. Contemplating the possibility of an intruder, I discreetly removed my phone and began recording. I gave Adam a gesture in my direction, and he cautiously opened the front door. "Whose shoes are these?" he inquired, gesturing to a selection of women's pumps and men's leather shoes in the foyer. These sneakers obviously did not belong to us. I might have thought Adam was cheating by bringing another woman home if these were his shoes and he wasn't present. However, the fact that he was standing directly next to me indicated that there was an intruder in our home. Adam, sensing my concern, reached for his umbrella, prepared to use it if necessary, and stepped forward. We saw that the light in the living room was on, and that food was strewn all over the table, as though it had just been purchased. It didn't seem like a burglar would take such action. I pondered. Subsequently, I detected a voice approaching, and it became evident that the noise originated from the restroom. The person who was speaking was in the restroom. Adam was quite frightened, and I could understand why. The voice was gritty and disturbing. The idea that someone was using our house without our knowledge unnerved us. Curious and worried about who could be doing this, I slowly opened the bathroom door and immediately saw some clothes thrown around. "Ah!" I gasped, unable to hold back the sound. The clothes were unmistakably my dad's. His large jacket, neatly hung on a hanger, was the one he had worn at the dinner party just the other day. The shirt and pants, carelessly discarded, were all too familiar. Mom had left just a few hours ago, so there was no way she could be here. It looked like Dad had brought another woman into my home for an affair. The realization made me frown as I looked up at Adam, wondering how I could explain this to him. He was staring, pale-faced, at a necklace resting on top of the washing machine. I recognized the necklace and the earrings beside it. They belonged to my mom. "This can't be, Mom," Adam said. His words confirmed it. The people using our home for their affair were my dad and Teresa. I pulled Adam, who seemed ready to burst in on them, back to the living room. Moving away from the echoing voices seemed to help him calm down a bit. "Shouldn't we call your mom and my dad?" Adam suggested, though he seemed unsure. The thought of bringing Mom and Eric here now felt like it would lead to a crisis for both families. But I couldn't just ignore what was happening. The vulgar noises were still coming from the bathroom, suggesting they wouldn't come out anytime soon. I contacted Mom, and Adam reached out to Eric right away. "It's about Dad," Adam said. "Your dad told me he was going golfing today. He left early this morning and won't be back until tonight. Should I tell him to call you when he gets back?" "It seems that Dad is at home with Teresa," I said, unable to mention what was actually happening in the bathroom. But that was enough for Mom to understand the seriousness of the situation. In a tense voice, she said, "I'll be right there," and hung up. Less than 20 minutes later, Mom arrived, looking pale, with Eric right behind her, utterly bewildered. The voices had stopped, but we could still hear the shower running. Thankfully, the loud voices that had filled the hallway earlier were no longer heard. "Adam, what do you mean Teresa is here? I told you Mom went on a day trip with friends and won't be back until tonight," Eric asked, full of questions. We had informed him that Dad was with someone, but whether he was confused or just didn't want to accept it, he avoided looking toward the bathroom. Feeling sorry for Eric, Adam signaled to me, and I started recording on my phone again. Adam made no effort to hide his approach as he stormed into the bathroom. "Hey, what the heck are you doing in our house?" Adam shouted as he pushed the room door open, making a dull sound. Screams from Dad and Teresa were followed by loud arguing between Dad and Adam. Adam, now standing in the doorway, grumbled in disgust. I grabbed a bath towel and tossed it into the bathroom, desperately wanting to avoid seeing them make it. I really didn't want to see that behind me. Mom, no longer able to hold back, pushed past me and stormed into the bathroom. She shoved Adam and Teresa aside, and with a voice I'd never heard from her before, dragged Dad out of the room. Eric, finally mustering his courage, followed Mom into the bathroom and pulled Teresa out. Both of them hurriedly dressed in their scattered clothes, and within minutes, they were sitting in the hallway with their hair still damp. All of us, including me, were panting heavily, our shoulders rising and falling with each breath. Mom broke the silence with a thin voice. "Why her?" Her question was the start of Dad and Teresa's explanations. It all began with Teresa developing a crush on Dad. Since Dad is a company president, he has connections with some flashy industries. He pays much more attention to his appearance than most men his age, and even I have to admit, he looks stylish and sophisticated. Teresa reportedly fell for Dad the moment they met, captivated by his demeanor. Their relationship started to grow during the family gatherings we organized for Adam's and my wedding. Teresa, trying to show herself as a good person, eagerly took charge of planning the dinner parties, gradually getting closer to Dad. At one of these dinner parties, she finally worked up the courage to confess her feelings. Adam, looking sick to his stomach, glared at Teresa. But Dad was also part of the problem. He was drawn to Teresa, who dressed in bold makeup and flashy clothes, exuding a feminine allure in contrast to Mom, who quietly took care of the home. But both Dad and Teresa had their own families. Mom often worked at the same company as Dad, and on Dad's days off, Eric usually had a similar schedule, so they needed a place to meet in secret. Surprisingly, they chose our home. Adam and I have a hobby of taking short trips and staying at nearby hotels during long weekends, which inadvertently gave them the opportunity. Teresa would say, "It's not safe to leave the house empty for too long, so I'll check on it," as a way to confirm our absence. Then she would contact Dad. Since we were neighbors and often shared our plans without suspicion, our house became their secret meeting place. We never gave them a spare key, thinking it was impossible for them to enter. But it seems they secretly took a key during one of the dinner parties and made a copy. They were careful to leave no trace of their presence in our house. They brought their own food, took all the trash with them, collected any hair from the drain after using the bathroom, and wiped down any moisture before leaving. This time, Dad contacted Teresa after hearing that I was going back to my parents' house because of Adam's business trip. I had only informed Mom about the change in plans, leading to this unexpected encounter. If we hadn't discovered it now, who knows how long we would have been deceived. Naturally, both Dad and Teresa were served with divorce papers by their spouses. They faced claims for compensation during the divorce proceedings and were disowned by Adam and me. Although Dad and Teresa initially admitted to what they had done, they later claimed we were lying and had no evidence. However, I had recorded everything on my phone, and when I presented that as evidence, the divorce proceedings went smoothly. With the settlement money, we moved into a new apartment. Adam, who already had a bit of a germophobia, developed a complete aversion to the room after that day, and now refuses to even go near it. I also found it too painful to keep living in a house that had been used for their affair, so I fully agreed to move. Now, Mom, who has lost all love for Dad, lives with us after the divorce was finalized. Teresa, on the other hand, seemed quite pleased with herself. She became openly defiant, maybe influenced by Dad, and accepted the divorce settlement and compensation without much resistance. She moved in with Dad right after the divorce, and they got married, finally getting what they wanted, being together. It seemed like everything was going perfectly for them, with Teresa becoming the wife of a company president and looking forward to a great life ahead. However, their plans quickly went wrong. Dad's new business venture failed, and the company's performance rapidly declined, like a balloon losing air. When Mom heard about this, she simply nodded as if to say it was expected. "Who do you think was holding everything together all this time?" she said. It was Mom who had been quietly managing the complaints about Dad's harsh business tactics, both inside and outside the company, and supporting the business behind the scenes. She handled a major part of the company's finances and dealt with clients. Naturally, she resigned from the company when the divorce happened, and Dad, eager to get rid of her, didn't ensure a proper handover. As a result, the company was left with unhappy employees, and many of them followed Mom's lead and resigned, causing a staffing shortage. Dad had always believed that it was a wife's duty to support her husband, so he naturally expected Teresa to take over Mom's role. However, Teresa, who had always been a housewife, didn't understand the business at all and was of no help. The mass resignation of employees, fueled by the scandal of Dad's divorce, became widespread gossip, and clients began to pull out from Dad's company, citing poor performance. Dad's company couldn't last even half a year and soon went bankrupt. Their house and assets were seized, and they were left with significant debt, including unpaid wages. They managed to find a place in a cheap apartment, living a difficult life. Despite his age and wanting a company that would treat him as a president, Dad couldn't secure a new job. Naturally, his frustration grew, and he turned to gambling as a way to relieve his stress. But even that wasn't enough. He began to blame Teresa, saying none of this would have happened if it weren't for the affair. "It was Teresa who seduced me." His anger led to him becoming violent towards Teresa. Teresa, struggling to make ends meet with part-time jobs and desperately trying to support Dad, grew disillusioned with him. As their situation worsened, He sank deeper into his gambling addiction, wasting even the money they needed for living expenses. Unable to bear Dad's constant verbal abuse, Teresa eventually fled the apartment. She ended up at Eric's house, where Adam had grown up. Adam and I happened to be visiting Eric, who had become somewhat reclusive due to the emotional strain of the divorce. So, we often checked in on him. When we found the front door open, we walked in to see who was there and were met by Teresa. At first, we didn't recognize her. She looked so different that we thought an old woman we didn't know was speaking to us. The once well-groomed Teresa was unrecognizable now, looking worn out. Teresa tried to apologize and seek forgiveness for what she had done in the past, but all I could do was give her a bitter look, thinking it was too convenient for her to ask for forgiveness now. Eric must have been quite shocked to see her, yet he seemed somewhat moved by the return of the woman he once loved. While he was trying to figure out how to ask her to leave, Adam, standing next to him, suddenly clutched his mouth and crouched down. Remembering Teresa's affair in our room, he couldn't hold it in and vomited right there. In a panic, Eric and I rushed to get a trash can and water, and we heard Adam's cries of rejection toward Teresa from behind his back. Feeling sorry for Adam and unsure how to handle the situation, it was Eric who took action. He looked Teresa straight in the eyes and firmly told her, "There is no chance of reconciliation. Leave," he said, sending Teresa away with strong words. Teresa seemed deeply affected by her own son's rejection, especially seeing how sick it made him. Without saying another word, she stumbled out the front door and left. Since that incident, Teresa has kept her distance from Eric, and there has been no contact from either Dad or Teresa. It seems our ties with them have been completely severed. Adam was under the weather for a few days, but he has since recovered, and together we are focused on building a warm and loving home. Mom has shown incredible strength. She quickly found work, made new friends, and is moving on from Dad to enjoy her life. She's planning to rent an apartment for herself once she has saved enough, and I hope she chooses one close to her home. As for Eric, he seems to have brightened up a bit after adopting a stray cat that wandered into his yard. Taking in that one cat has led to 2 more cats gathering at his place, and now it's known in the neighborhood as a popular hangout for cats. The ordeal caused by Dad and Teresa involved the whole family in a tough situation, but those of us who remain have strengthened our bonds and are doing our best to move forward.